Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Caitlin Giles, and I am the DEI consultant over at Southern Nuclear. And on behalf of myself and the other speakers, we are glad that you are joining us for Leading Change for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. You will hear from me and along with the other groups who make up the Atomic Allies. And before we get started, I do have some points to make, just some housekeeping items. So we do want everyone to hold their questions until the end. This and I'm glad I didn't know this. So I actually just learned this here a second ago. So you have a chat and then you have a Q&A button. So if you have questions that you would like to have addressed during the Q&A portion, dump it in the Q&A section, because the chat, use that for if you are having like technical issues, suddenly you can't hear, you can't see or something. But if you drop your questions for the Q&A portion in there, we won't see it. Okay, we're only going to be checking that for any technical issues. So any questions that you would like to be addressed during the Q&A portion at the end, drop in the Q&A bucket, I guess is what we'll call it. This also is being recorded. It'll, after this, be placed in the WINS YouTube channel. And also, we have created a one-pager for you. So if we're talking about resources or websites or anything like that, don't feel like you have to try and hurry up and write those down, because we do have a one-pager that has hopefully all the links and information that you would possibly need, and we'll send that to you at the end. So if you have any questions, go ahead and drop it in if you have any questions about this session or technical issues, drop it in the chat. And like I said, if you have any questions that you would like for us to address at the end, go ahead and be dropping those in the Q&A button. And I'm not really sure what to say there. And before we get started, before I kick it off to the first person, I did want to do a quick dive into what diversity, equity, and inclusion is, because we meaning me and the panel members, we didn't want to assume anyone had any prior knowledge or that we were all starting from the same spot. So did want to cover really high level what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. And I did prepare a couple of slides for you all. So let me share the PowerPoint. Click share, get my little screen going. So hopefully this is not new information, but in case it is, welcome. We're all open to learning new things. So first and foremost, want to start with diversity. I always want to start with this because folks feel like diversity is only race and gender, right? And diversity is any aspect that makes you you. It's any aspect that makes you different from somebody else. So you may have seen it as a wheel. I've seen it, as a circle, and it has the different layers, but this is a different way to look at it, where you have what can be considered primary aspects of diversity. So age, physical abilities, race, ethnicity, gender identity, LGBTQ. For the most part, these are seen as things that are stagnant. I say for the most part, but things that you are typically born with, or, I know physical abilities can change over time. That's why I say for the most part. But things that you may or may not be able to change about who you are, right? Secondary, education, class, income, language, marital status, things like that. And then you have your workplace. So these are things about like where you work, what you do, your experience, your level, your shift, your location, all of those aspects. And then style. So you can talk about your leadership style, your communication style, your personality traits, right? All of these are ways that we're different. So wanted to highlight that diversity is more than just your race and your gender, and it's any way that you are different from somebody else. And for equity, hopefully you've seen this. I really like this graphic because I'm sure most people have seen the one with, it's like the three folks and they're looking over the fence to watch baseball. But I like this because it shows even different aspects of diversity compared to that other one. So I always like to highlight this because some people will say like, why equity? Why not equality? No one's poo-pooing on equality, right? Equality is great, but you can only get to equality once you have done diversity, equity, and inclusion well, okay? So equality is the goal, but when you are not there, these are the things that you have to work on. You have to work on your diversity, equity, and inclusion. So equality is giving everyone the same thing regardless of what they need, versus equity is giving everyone what they need based on their status, you can see here physical abilities, height, whatever their aspects of diversity are, equity is meeting them where they need to be met, versus equality is giving everyone the same thing regardless. So I really like this graphic because it does add in that aspect of physical ability, right? And then finally, inclusion. So your diversity efforts, your equity efforts do not matter if you are not considering inclusion, okay? You might hear this called belonging, which they can be used synonymously, but inclusion is something that you have to be intentional about. You have to think about doing this day in and day out. Inclusion is really easy for people to hang their hat on because everyone knows what it's like to not be included, right? I have not met a single person, and if you know one, please direct them my way. I would love to speak to them, who would say like, I'm going to go to work today and I hope I am not valued. I hope I am just disrespected. I hope I'm ignored. I don't want to be listened to. I love when people ignore me, right? Like no one would say that. So we all interact with inclusion either intentionally or unintentionally, whether you know it or not, day in and day out, because we all want to be valued, respected, being listened to, being met where you need to be met, right? Instead of just that equality aspect where everyone gets the same thing. That may not work for you. That may not be what you need. That may not be how you feel included. So just, having an active role day in and day out, having a seat at the table, is what inclusion is. So like I said, diversity and equity do not matter if you don't have inclusion. You can have the most diverse workforce, but if they don't feel included, they're going to leave, right? It doesn't matter if you've hit all your diversity numbers, goals, whatever. It doesn't matter if they aren't included and they aren't staying. So that is the quick and dirty overview of DEI. And I wanted to make sure that we were on the same foundation. And I'll close with saying, I know DEI gets a bad rep, right? People are like, oh, DEI. I'm sure we've all had a really bad experience talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. A lot of people feel like they're trying to be forced to change or accept something that they don't want to or that they don't agree with. And that's not the point of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The point is, you can have your personal beliefs, the things that you agree with, the things that you don't agree with. But what I ask, I would say anyone who works in this space would ask is just don't let those reasons or those differences be why you treat someone differently. That's all we're trying to get at, is for people to be more open-minded, for people to be kinder, to have respect. If you don't believe in XYZ facet, of diversity, that's okay. We're not asking you to suddenly turn into that XYZ facet of diversity, right? But I'm asking that you don't treat someone differently because of it. So that's the crux of it. So that is my soapbox. I will step off here now for a minute, and I'm going to turn it over to Joyce Cooper, who's going to introduce herself and what she is here to present on behalf of the Center for Energy Workforce Development.
Thanks, Caitlin. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so honored to be here. I'm going to share 3 different documents. So I'm going to start with a PowerPoint, and then I'll go to showing you the actual roadmap, the DE&I roadmap for industry change. And then I kind of put it in a different format so it's easier to read. So let's start with this one. So here we are, leading change for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And let me start the slideshow. And that's what you should see. Here's what I'm going to cover in the next 15 minutes. That's my goal, is to get all this information delivered to you and shared in 15 minutes. I may go over by a couple, but I'll try my best to stay within 15. I'll tell you a little bit about me and the company where I work, Omaha Public Power District, how we got here with this DE&I roadmap for industry change. Who were the creators of the roadmap? Then we'll spend the bulk of our time talking about what are the different elements of the roadmap. And then as you're hearing about the roadmap, I'd ask you to look at the information through 2 lenses. Where are you in the in your DE&I journey, and where is your organization in the DE&I journey? And then I'll wrap up with how to use the roadmap. So Caitlin, thank you for kind of level setting everyone. This is what we mean by diversity and equity and inclusion, because that will make sense. I will say though, that full definition of diversity, you won't see that referenced. You'll have it defined in the roadmap, but really this is about what DE&I work needs to be done in the energy industry. And so you'll see a strong focus on women. You'll see a strong focus on BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color. And so understand that you can take that and expand it to other audiences, whether it be Gen Z or veterans. But you'll see the language is really focused on how can the energy industry do better with recruiting and retaining and moving females and BIPOC in the organization. So, well, let me tell you a little bit about me. So I'm the Director of Diversity Inclusion at Omaha Public Power District in Omaha, Nebraska. I am approaching my 18th year with the company, and a little bit about, and I've mainly done the DE&I work. I've also done organizational development work with the company. As far as OPPD's energy portfolio, it includes coal and wind and gas and solar. And for 43 years, OPPD also had a nuclear plant. And so in 2016, our board voted after a lot of research was done, and currently that plant, Fort Calhoun, is in the decommissioning phase. So you may be wondering, why am I here? Well, I've been involved with the Center for Energy Workforce Development for about 10 years. And I've been involved in different ways. And so one of them was being on, and I'm currently still on the Executive Council for Workforce Development. And I'm also on the steering committee for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that, in those two places in CWD, is where I met Lori Brady, who's the senior director of HR training and development at the NEI. So Lori was not available. She knew that we had worked together on this roadmap, and she said, Joyce, I know you're not part of NEI, but would you speak to this roadmap? And I said, I'd be happy to. So that's why you have me and not Lori Brady. Now, one of the main pillars for CWD is how do we attract and retain a qualified and diverse workforce. And so over the last, I'd say 4 years, CWD really looked and said, how do we do that? And their thought was, how do we do it together? As an industry, we have similar challenges, similar barriers. Will we be stronger together working on this? And the answer was yes. So in fact, the executive director of CWD spent a couple of years meeting with these folks, NEI, AGA, EEI, you can see all listed on the slide. And these entities said, yes, we'll be stronger together. Let's collaborate and do a DE&I roadmap for change that will help everyone in the industry, whether they're just starting their journey or they're mature in their journey, whether they're a small company or whether they're a multi-state company. And so special thanks to all of these, because it wouldn't have happened for the industry. And I think it's pretty cool that WIN and NAYGN and ANS have similar focus on diversity is important and how do we do it together. And so that was CWD's thinking and why they moved forward with that. So now there are two things that they did. They said, we want the industry to change and we'll work on that together. But we also know that there's work that needs to be done in a company. And so when you see these suggestions or recommendations, what you're going to see is this is what the industry should be doing. These are our action steps. And this is what companies can do or labor organizations can do. And together, that's how you move that strategy forward. So I want to kind of take a small detour and just say, one of my favorite hobbies is traveling. I love to travel all over the world. And so I want to ask you a question. How do you plan for a trip? And so I'll tell you just briefly about my father and I took 3 weeks and we traveled to 4 different countries in Europe. And so, you know, I would say that you can plan a trip with every detail. This is the day, this is the time, these are the sites we're going to go to. Everything is planned out. Then you have people who plan for a trip that say, you know what, we'll just get to where we're going and then we'll just let whatever happens and we'll be sensitive to what might arise with very little planning. I would tell you that my father and my trip to Europe was in between. So we would go to London for the first 2 days. We took tours, we kind of got the lay of the land, but then our time was our own. And we then dictated what we would, how we would spend our time in London or in Paris or in Berlin. And so I'm sure that we probably have people who plan to the minute detail and those who are like, I'll be flexible and see what happens. So when it comes to the DE&I roadmap for industry change, it was very specific and very detailed. And so I would say there are 5 stops on this roadmap. One is ensuring a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace. And so what you're going to see is that first one is about the workplace. The second one is about the workforce. The third one, or C, is really about recruiting and building those talent pipelines. The fourth one is about, okay, we worked really, really hard to attract people. How do we retain that talent and give them some career mobility so that they stay? And then lastly, and really these things should be going on simultaneously, but that last one is about how do you expand the diversity in the C-suite and leadership roles so you have representation. And so that's the roadmap you're going to see. So give me a moment. I'm going to show you the actual document of the roadmap for change. And that's going to be on you'll be able to access it when you get this resource guide at the end. And let me show you what that looks like. So you'll see this is the first one about the workplace. And the writing is really small because it's not really meant to be in a presentation. It's really meant, it's a booklet that you can print out. And it really then says, this is what the industry should be doing. And here's what the company and labor organization should be doing. But we're not going to stay on this because I know the print is really small, but you'll get a link so that you have all of this. Just so you know, there are 95 actions that industry and companies can take in this roadmap. So a lot of the what should be done in the DE&I space. And so there's actually 27 industry actions and there's 68 company actions. And so I will not be sharing all 95, but I'm going to try to share about 20 to 25 of those. So now I'm going to go to the third document, which hopefully you can read a little bit better. And are you able to see that? I'm going to assume yes. So when you look at this, here's the element about the workplace. How do you ensure that there's a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive energy workplace? And so I highlighted a couple of things that I want to focus on. And oops, I almost closed it. So that I thought this is going to be really important for for us as an industry, and that is to secure an energy career cluster in states or national level. And I want to give you an update. The CWD has been working on this for a couple of years in Washington, D.C., and they are very close to getting this approved. And so a lot of progress is made on, yes, energy is significant enough, and there are so many careers that it should be its own career cluster. So more to come. And once it's passed in DC federally, or nationwide, it then begins to trickle down to the states. So now we as companies can go into schools and help teachers and students understand what careers look like in the energy cluster. The other is the industry can also host DE&I forums that are specifically around energy. And CWD did its first DE&I forum in 2023. And their next one will be May 9th and 10th of 2024. Now, if you go over to what can companies do? One is, we know that in our industry, safety is number one. And so how do we make DE&I culture an equal, or in that same space of it's that important that we do it just like safety is? And the other is making sure that we're not just doing DE&I, in isolation, but it's really aligned to the company strategy. This second roadmap element is really around how the workforce, how do we increase the diversity of our workforce? And you'll see what can the industry do, create an industry-led group to support senior leaders. We really believe that leadership can drive a lot of the culture, drive a lot of what's important in the company. And so that's what industry can do as a whole. But for us, I highlighted 4 things because I thought they were really key. One is to ensure that employee resource groups have an executive sponsor. And I know at OPPD we have 14, and we have an executive or VP that is a sponsor for all of our employee resource groups. We can have making sure that you have dedicated people to work on this. In some companies, and not necessarily energy, where they'll have someone who has a job to do organizational development or talent acquisition. They also have to do D&I, but they don't have a dedicated resource. And that's really important, to be able to have a dedicated team or individual that can develop the strategy, implement it, educate, etc. The other 2 things are systemic, and that's DE&I is more than doing lots of good programs or community outreach. It really is, what systems do we have in our companies and our organizations that there's some bias in there? And until we disrupt the system, things kind of stay the same. And so making sure you have DE&I policies that say, hey, here's the expectation, here's the behavioral norms, looking at all the policies for bias and changing it, and then succession planning. How do people move through the organization, and have you removed bias from it? This third stop is about, and this is a huge one, it has a lot of actions, and it's about recruitment and pipeline building, right? So in my time in the energy industry, when I go out and talk to students of all ages, I ask, what does OPPD do? And they don't know. And so it's kind of like we're the best kept secret until there's an outage. And so it's important that there be some kind of industry brand. And in fact, CWD is working on a $35 million marketing campaign, and it'll be a 5-year plan, and they're raising funds to do that, to really elevate the importance of energy and all the careers that we have, because we need the workforce. We need to be able to throw a larger net to attract people to our industry. You'll see for the company, I'll just highlight, I highlighted 4, but I'll just talk about 2. And that is, even as individual organizations, we cannot do it alone. And so our local work is about forging partnerships with people. Hey, we're making sure that we're in the community, building partnerships, and being able to create a greater awareness of energy and energy jobs. The other thing I'll highlight on this one is participate on community boards and councils and committees. And that's something each of us can do. And when you can be parts of, you know, organizations that serve women, organizations that serve BIPOC, organizations that serve Gen Z, you begin to one, hear what are the issues in those groups, build partnerships, and it goes back to the first one of how do we work together to create pipelines of talent that come into the industry. There's a second part to this, developing a diverse talent pool, and how do we increase the number of applicants. This
Is it frozen just for me?
Nope.
All right.
No.
Just making sure.
I think we were all wondering if it was our Wi-Fi.
I know. It's like, is it me?
So I'll try to
I-
message Joyce if you want to say something.
Yes, I will. Let me pop back up. Look, I'm back. I'm back on video. So it looks like we lost Joyce. We will try to get her back. But what I'll do in the meantime is I will jump to the Women in Nuclear section. And then when Joyce comes back, then we can go back and continue the conversation on the roadmap, if that works for everybody. I can't see anyone, so I'm going to assume yes. So my name, again, is Caitlin Giles, and I work at Southern Nuclear, but I am a member of Women in Nuclear, and I'll talk about this in a second. And I lead the LGBTQIA+ subcommittee. So just wanted to talk really quickly, again, pretty high level about the work that WIN is doing in the DEI space. So since I have access to share my screen, I'm going to share my screen again. And you will have these links on your one pager. So like I said earlier, don't feel like you need to run and try to write this down. But this is one of the links that you'll see. So I linked the main Women in Nuclear page, but then there are a number of links that are specific to DEI. So the second link will take you here. I did want to, I'm going to read my notes on these because there was no way I was going to memorize this, but did want to let you know what our strategic objectives were in the DEI space. Okay, so there are 4. The first is to attract a diverse workforce to pursue professions and trades in the nuclear sector. The second is to foster a culture of inclusion and belonging that retains a diverse workforce in the nuclear sector. The third is to create professional development and networking opportunities for career advancement. And the fourth is to inspire advocacy and public support for the advancement of nuclear energy and technology. So those are our 4 strategic objectives that really drive the work that we do. And just to explain kind of how we're set up, so we have the oversight committee, and then we have the DEI committee with our committee chair, Mandy Hare. And then this is where you get into the subcommittees. So we have inclusion, the employee life cycle. We have middle management. We have, like I said, LGBTQIA+. And then we have the DEI library and outreach. So these committees put on events throughout the year. They put out resources. The LGBTQIA helped, if you all were able to attend, if anyone was able to attend the WIN conference last year, there was a culture track, and then there was an inclusion module, and the LGBTQ, I can't even say that now, LGBTQIA plus committee helped come up with the content that was given in the presentation. So we have our, the different subcommittees have our hands in little things. And I will go ahead and put a plug in here for the DEI library. So this is a great resource for folks who are looking for DEI information, but you are also, once you become a WIN member, you are more than welcome to submit things to the DEI library. I know there are always calls for adding information, if there's anything that you would like to include that you think would be for the better of the masses, feel free to submit that. So all of that will be easily accessible for you on the one pager, but then did also want to highlight for the some of the programs that we're doing that are related to the strategic objectives. So, we have the DEI committee. I've already kind of explained the purpose and the work that we do. I talked about the DEI library, but we also have a number of programs. So one is Next. This is the Nuclear Executives of Tomorrow. That's a program that we offer. There's the Grow program. So Joyce was mentioning during her roadmap some of the activities that that really fall in the DEI space. So these programs that are women focused, that are these mentoring programs that are women focused, that's really what we're trying to get at in Women in Nuclear. So if you have any questions about any of these programs or how you can contribute, how you can join, always feel free to reach out to anyone on the website, but also you can reach out to me and I can help direct you in the right spot. But lots of good work happening in the DEI space, and we're really proud of it. And before I close the screen, hopefully you saw our really cute DEI Women in Nuclear logo that launched last year, and it was great and we all love it. So feel free to join Women in Nuclear, and if you have any questions, reach out to me. So before I turn it over to Sarah to talk about NAYGN, I see there's a new phone number. Is that Joyce?
That is Joyce. I am so sorry, my just like cut out. It said no, so I'm on my phone.
That's okay.
So if you want me to, I can come at the end, and maybe by then I'll be able to show my screen.
Yes. So do you want us to keep going and then give you a few minutes to see if you can share your screen again?
That would be great. Yeah,
okay.
I plan for everything like that.
Okay, awesome. That is no problem. So Sarah, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself and then talk about the work that NAYGN is doing in this space.
Yep. Thanks, Caitlin. Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Davis. I am with NAYGN, which stands for the North American Young Generation in Nuclear. I sit on the board of directors as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for NAYGN. And my background is I work currently as a licensing engineer for GE Hitachi up in Canada, actually. So I'm from the States originally. I'm from Tennessee, went to school at the University of Tennessee, and got my background is in nuclear engineering. And I recently got married and moved up to Canada. So a little bit of another aspect of diversity that NAYGN has is that we are not just a US organization. We cover all of North America, so Canada, the US, and Mexico. And similarly to WIN and ANS, we have a board, and then also, companies, universities, and organizations can have their own chapters that do local events and whatnot too. So similarly to Caitlin, just a bit of background on NAYGN's DEI journey. And so, we are relatively new in our diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. Back in 2020 is when we really, as an organization, started to put a focus on DE&I in the height of COVID and the social injustice with, following the murder of George Floyd. NAYGN took a look at the organization and said, hey, we aren't talking about this. We aren't doing anything about this. What do we need to do? So we started a DE&I committee. And the link to the information there is going to be on the one pager that we have alluded to that'll be sent out afterwards. But we formed a DE&I committee. We put the call out to our membership to see if anybody was interested in joining. And then we got together and decided some key aspects that we needed to focus on as an organization. So one of the actions that came from the formation of the committee was to also have a dedicated spot on our board of directors that was dedicated to DE&I. So that is where I came in. My background is engineering, but DE&I is definitely, my side focus and passion project. So I was very interested in and came on board. You don't have to be a pro. You don't have to be have your background or your education in diversity and inclusion to try and make a difference in your organization. So we put together a team. We meet monthly and just look at our organization and make sure that we are, as an organization, really emphasizing and focusing on different DE and aspects that are going to make our organization better and our membership feel more included, and all of the different lists that Caitlin talked about earlier with DE and I. So those go from having various webinars, lunch and learns on different topics, making sure that we're giving our membership, a diverse set of skills. So that's everything with technical topics, talking about SMRs and things like that, to diversity and inclusion topics. Like we had a Black History Month webinar, or partnering with WIN and ANS to do these types of webinars. We have signed on to Equal by 30 as well. So if you don't know what Equal by 30, just it's a push to make sure that we are having an equal representation amongst genders by 2030. So one of the key aspects of that is making sure that any webinars or panels that we have, specifically panels, are not what we call manels. And so especially in the nuclear industry, we may see that here and there. And so making sure that we do have a diverse set of genders amongst our panels. We also provide input. We, as an organization, we hold different contests for grade schools. So that's drawing contests, essay contests, and also scholarships to our different conferences for university students. And so making sure that we have a DE&I impact on that as well, whether that be the scholarship topic itself, or just having a diverse set of scholarship recipients and things like that. So that's really, what we try to do as a committee, is just making sure that every aspect of our organization has a DEI element or a DEI lens in itself. Another thing that we have done is that we have now been audited twice by our own choice. We went out and looked for a specific company that would do a DE&I audit amongst for our organization. So looking at how our organization is structured, our different committees, our website, our different information and our resources that we have out there, different chapter charters, just every little nook and cranny of our organization to view and see, what we're doing right, but most importantly, what we need to work on. And so we did that at the beginning of our DE&I journey in 2020 and got a list of action items, really put some stuff into work, and now actually just got the final report for our 2024 audit. So using the same company to take a look and see, okay, how have we progressed? Are we, moving forward and doing the right thing? So we just got that back out. We are working now to publish that audit so our members can see that, and we want to be as transparent as possible to make sure that everybody is aware of exactly what we need to do, and that also feeds in to another aspect of NAYGN that I believe is really valuable to the industry and our various Atomic Allies organizations, which is our NAYGN career report. So what this is that we send out a survey amongst our members. It's a pretty lengthy survey. It takes quite a bit of time, but it has all of the questions that we could ever want to ask our members. So in terms of demographics, in terms of, all again, the whole entire list that Caitlin put out for diversity. So race, gender, what your level, your classification, your education, your background, where you are, which region, salary, and then also what topics that our members are looking forward to, wanting to learn more about, where they think NAYGN can improve, all of that nature. And so we put that together into a full report, and we do that every 2 years. And so this gives a good insight to our industry of, of our organization, but as a small piece of the pie amongst the entire industry. So I did forget to mention also, I know North American young generation in nuclear implies that we're cutting out a bit of diversity there with the word young, but I want to assure everybody that you don't have to be, quote, young to be in NAYGN. People of all ages and backgrounds, and statuses and levels in their organization can be part of that. It's just the only age limit is that you need to be under 36 to run for the board of directors, which is where it comes in. But so with that career report, we also had our DE&I look at it and expanded our survey questions to make sure that we are being, inclusive, and we're getting the information that we need from the career report. So we do publish that on our website every 2 years. And so we just are finalizing the 2024 career report now. Hopefully it will be, I believe, ready within the next month or so to be published for our members. And so then because we did this audit in 2020, and grew those survey questions out, now we're actually starting to see trends in our information that we're pulling. So really, really excited about that. But some key areas that we saw in our last career report was actually some salary inequalities amongst gender and ethnicity. So we were able to go and talk about those findings that we had, because that's a big deal in the industry. And I know that has definitely, people I've talked to, that's definitely been something that's affected them. It's affected me before. So, and the last thing I'll talk about, I know I'm taking up a bit of time. The last thing I'll talk about is that we do have DEI centered partnerships. So, obviously our Atomic Allies group, but we have also partnered, like I said, with Equal by 30. We have partnered with EHRC, which is the Electricity Human Resources of Canada. So it's specifically human resources focused, but with a main emphasis on DE&I. And then also Women in Renewable Energy is our latest partnership as well. So diverse in terms of women, but also not just nuclear, but renewable energy in itself. So all of those links you'll see in the one pager that Caitlin has brought up. But I think that is all that I have for NAYGN. So I will pass it back over to you, Caitlin, or are we going straight to
okay. Yeah, no, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it. And now we will turn it over to Dr. Lee Winfrey, who's representing ANS.
Sorry, everybody. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. So I'll just give a quick overview about ANS and where we've been in this space. So just first, a little bit about me. I've been a professor of nuclear engineering for most of my career, but about 2 years ago, I left Penn State for a small school in the SUNY system called Maritime College, which actually used to have both a reactor and a nuclear program, which I'm hoping to revive. And I'm Dean of Engineering there. I'm also a member of the Board of Directors of the American Nuclear Society and a member of the Diversity in ANS Committee. So the Diversity in ANS Committee was formed about 6 years ago in 2018 out of several constituent organizations, so Pride, WIN, etc. And what we were looking to do was, what ANS was looking to do was come up with a more elevated group. So at the same time, in addition to sort of consolidating and expanding the roles of those sort of earlier parts of our organization, we also, the DIA committee was actually elevated to division status. So what that means is we get a seat at the table for literally everything ANS does, from policy decisions to we're currently rewriting our mission and vision statements. And our CEO and our president, our incoming president is actually a member of the DIA, Diversity in ANS, group as well. And so what that really does is it gives us a fabric for having this conversation, and particularly in ANS, while we all agree, I think, that equity, inclusion, and justice are good things, we're also coming at it from a workforce perspective, right? That we're looking at developing really good engineers. So I'll just give you a few other things because I know Joyce has some interesting things to say. I'll say if you're interested, DIA does manage, and it's in your one-pager, a set of grants for different, basically travel or participating in different events. And you do not have to identify as a member of a marginalized group. What you have to do to take advantage of these systems is be invested in having the conversation. So I would just put it out there. It includes travel grants. It includes grants to bring in elementary and school students. And so I think it provides a really good opportunity for people to join the party. And I'll give one more anecdote and say, you know, when I was first starting my career in grad school, I had sort of, based off of my research area, different professional societies that I could join and get really involved in. And the thing that always kept coming back to me was that people, when I first went to my first ANS meeting, people were glad for me to be there. And so I think that's what DIA is trying to propagate, or to keep propagating, I should say. So yeah, that's the short version of ANS, and feel free to ask me any questions. And shall I just pass it over to Joyce?
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Winfrey. So Joyce, are you in a position? There you are. We can see you. We'll turn it back to you to kind of wrap us up before we go to Q&A.
So, Caitlin, I want to be sensitive. We have 12 more minutes. And are there a lot of questions? And should I just say that they'll get the link?
So unfortunately, we don't have anything in the Q&A. I did put a reminder. So if you all have anything, now's the time to do it. But until we get anything, Joyce, feel free to finish, you know, what you were going to say and wrap us up. I think we're good.
And you should see it. So sorry for that disruption. Thanks for moving on. And so I want to talk about the 4th out of 5 roadmap stops. And that element is about retaining. And so I highlighted, and I'm just going to stick to the company because that's where the real work and the heavy lift happens. And I highlighted, hey, are we ensuring that the work environments for tradeswomen are female friendly, their proper restrooms, that they have their uniforms and their tools and their equipment are appropriate for women. And this last thing about psych safety, you know, is there psychological safety in the work teams? And I know at OPPD, we have someone that was their whole job, was going around to different business units and talking about psych safety and being available for people to share where there wasn't psychological safety. The other is, you know, I kind of touched on this, is make sure you're reviewing your policies and your practices and make sure they're equitable. And then hold people accountable to the same standards. So that's 4 of the 5. This last one is really around leadership. What is leadership doing? And I'll say that what the industry can do is, one, can they publish articles in business publications and kind of to raise the visibility. And that's all part of that marketing campaign and rebranding of energy that will happen. But also, we're all doing some really cool programs. I loved hearing what was going on. How do you scale it? How do you scale it for emerging leaders, and how do you make sure that you're tracking your success? And I heard Sarah talk a lot about that. How do you create sponsorship and mentoring? I know mentoring is huge in organizations, and that's important to learn new skills. But where does sponsorship come? Because sponsorship really is where your careers, people are using their own political capital to speak on your behalf and open doors for you to move forward in your career. And so I think that's important. How do we do that as an industry, as a company? It just repeats locally. How do you do mentoring and sponsorship and making sure the succession planning has representation? And then lastly, how do you, oftentimes I'm in human capital, and so oftentimes we look at a requirement for a job and it says, oh, you have to have 10 years energy experience. How can you expand the search beyond the energy industry and utilities and look at what are the real skills and competencies that are needed by a leader? And do you see those skills and competencies in other industries? So it kind of just opens the door for a broader talent pool for leadership. So those are the 5 stops. I hope that you heard some of the organizations saying we're doing some of this stuff. And I hope that you saw for yourself that there's 95 different actions of what to do. And really what CEWD is working on now is how do you do it? And so the steering committee is still quite active. And with that, I will stop. I'm hoping there's some questions, and I'll stop sharing.
Awesome. Thank you, Joyce. I'm glad you were able to get back on and join us. So I still don't see, Caitlin, double check me. I don't see anything in the Q&A section, and I did check the chat just to be safe. I don't see anything there either.
That's correct.
That is correct. I did, for all of you, I did make a joke earlier. I'm glad Caitlin let us know that everyone can see the Q&A, because I said I was going to pretend to be like, oh man, we've got so many questions. How am I going to filter all this? And then I'm glad she gave me a heads up, so people didn't know I was fibbing about all the questions in there. So we'll wait one more second if Dr. Lee Winfrey and Sarah, if you all want to get on camera, but we won't belabor it. So I'll just give you like another minute to put something in there. And then Caitlin will be sending the one pager that we have talked about, 100 times and kept a mystery. We'll be sending that out at the end of this, correct?
Yes, and I will send it to all registrants, even if they didn't attend, and the recording will also be available.
Perfect.
Why don't we all go through the different organizations and give people the dates for our conferences? Because I think a lot of this content will also be featured. I can give wins July 22nd to the 24th in Pittsburgh. And Caitlin, as part of our DEI, well, the other Caitlin, as part of our DEI committee, we have a culture track that we plan. So a lot of the workforce and diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives will be covered there. And I guess NAYGN and ANS, if you want to plug your events.
Yeah, so our conference is going to be June 3rd through the 5th in Charlotte, North Carolina. We also have a DEI track. Caitlin Giles is going to be on one of our panels. So we're doing an understanding your culture and background as a plenary session, followed up by a breakout workshop relating to that. And then our second our second panel that Caitlin's going to be on is specifically about allyship in the industry. We recognize that our organizations are predominantly of a majority demographic, and so how does allyship look? What does that need to look like? So yeah, hope you can make it in the summer in the Charlotte heat. So excited.
Yeah, so Anna says two meetings that might be interesting to this group coming up. So the student meeting of the American Nuclear Society is actually taking place next weekend, the 4th through the 6th of April, in my last job at Penn State and State College, Pennsylvania. And I do know there will be some good content in this space. And then actually, there have been a bunch of emails sent out. If you are an ANS member, I will just point out that we actually very quickly, a few weeks ago, moved the annual meeting this summer by a week. And so the 2024 ANS annual conference is going to be June 16th through 19th in Las Vegas, Nevada. And then our biggest meeting every year is the Winter Conference and Expo, which is going to be November 17th through 21st in Orlando, Florida. So that's what ANS is doing.
Bold move to have that conference in Vegas in the middle of the summer. Bold.
Well, so there's a lot of reasons why that was.
Well, we can't say too much, Caitlin. We were in Arizona in July.
So true. So true. I blocked it out, right?
I do see
Sorry, go for it.
Price
Are you talking
Medic.
about the question? Yes. So I was going to ask it to the group. So we got conferences are often planned years in advance and involve significant costs and contract negotiations. How can organizations protect potentially vulnerable individuals if states where meetings are held pass legislation hostile to certainly potentially marginalized groups? Great question.
Yeah, so that has been something that we have really, really talked about as we're planning our conferences. So NAYGN, last year, we had our first standalone conference. And so, a lot of our energy is going into conference planning because takes a bit of work. So we're just getting used to it. But that is something that we talk about heavily. So for example, Charlotte, North Carolina, has had some legislation, or North Carolina in general, sorry, has had some legislation, in the past few years that, we are careful of, some of our members might not feel safe. And so, that is something that having somebody dedicated to DE&I and that lens and making sure, if anything, Price, you're right, there's so much cost and negotiations and contracts that you can't really get out of that right after it's selected. And so, okay, what do you do while you're there? Making sure that your members, everybody attending, can feel safe, that there's a dedicated person that they can go to, and making sure. And then now that we have this DEI, specific spot on our board, I am actively in those conversations of conference planning. So making sure that our next location will not be in an area where people may feel unsafe to go there. So I definitely think that's good. And I would encourage all of our organizations to have somebody with that lens as part of those conversations as that planning is going.
And I'll just add, there's not much to add, Sarah covered it, but if you don't know, that's okay. Find someone who does, right? No one is expected to be the subject matter expert on this ever evolving legislative climate. So don't be afraid to reach out, seek legal counsel, or, whatever that looks like for you, but it's good. The first is to know, to be aware that this is something that you should be aware of and looking into. And then the second is finding that person who can help guide you to make those decisions, because you don't have to think of it as a silo. No one expects you to know everything in that space.
Also, another point is that when you're in, when you're in those areas, oh, excuse me, I just kicked a dog bone. Making sure that you can be an agent of education and awareness in those areas, right? There are still, people who are attending from areas that might be vulnerable to certain populations, and that they they being from Tennessee, will still want to be part of those conversations. So want conferences to come, because there are lots of people who fall into those categories, of people who may be in communities that are more vulnerable. There are still so many people in those areas where that legislation kind of blankets over them. So to just just like look past them and say like, oh, well, we don't want to go there. It can also be an agent for education and awareness and training and in the area itself. So, you know, I don't want to just shove states as a whole like off the radar.
So I think you bring up a good point. I would just add that if you're already in a city and you already have, you know, put down your deposits, you can request security and then just make sure your attendees know if something happens, this is what you do. I mean, that's what we talk about is safety all the time. And now, you know, how do you introduce that to your conference?
Thank you, Joyce. And I'll close out for Caitlin. She has to run. There is one more question in the chat. With the change in DEI being defunded at universities and colleges, will organizations take that into consideration with conferences?
I think that's an interesting, so we actually just had a similar comment from our DEI auditor who comes actually from the UK. She's hesitant to post our DEI audit here, at least in the States, because of different DEI legislations. So it kind of goes hand in hand, or my analysis goes hand in hand with that is, you know, as a nonprofit organization, NAYGN is not funded by the state or federal government, right? So at a university level, the DE&I is being defunded within the university, but as a separate organization, as a separate body, I don't believe at our conferences we necessarily have to, that doesn't have to dictate what we talk about in a DEI sphere. So Caitlin, with your law background, you might you might know better.
No, you're right. And I think actually, if anything, it makes these organizations more important because whereas our student members for WIN or for NAYGN or ANS may not be getting the DNI training or information on their college campus, despite wanting it, or maybe professors wanting it, we can offer it. So I would also make sure that we don't avoid places because the government or universities are trying to stifle things because there's a lot of underserved, marginalized communities still living there. And so by leaving them without us and our resources and ability to be independent and do what we want and say what we want, we give them a voice and a different platform. So I would just keep that in mind too, that the boundaries of the state and the laws don't mean there aren't people there that we can help and serve.
I think that's a good point. So I don't know if this would impact universities, but I know it's impacted companies where they're using the words inclusion and belonging and respect and still doing the DE&I work under different terms. And that seems to have lowered the heat for them to get the work done.
Right. DE&I is just now such a buzzword.
Right. But can you do the work and call it by something else, you know, so that you can actually, it's important work. And everyone wants to be included. So that one doesn't usually raise any red flags.
Any other questions before we conclude? I don't see anything in the chat, but please feel free if in the Q&A. Have a last call. Okay. I don't see anyone typing or adding anything. I really appreciate everyone sticking around till 4 after 4.